البعض يقول زيادة، علمنا الزيادة من الخير، والنقصان ما هو؟ النقصان في الأمور السيئة، يعني السيئات تنقص بقراءة القرآن تنقص السيئات، وبقراءته تزداد الحسنات. في زيادة في هدى أو نقصان من عمى. واعلموا أنه ليس على أحد بعد القرآن من فاقة، يعني ليس هناك من فقر لمن يقرأ القرآن الكريم، ولا لأحد قبل القرآن من غنى، فاستشفوه من أدوائكم واستعينوا به على لأواكم، فإن فيه شفاء من أكبر الداء، وهو الكفر والنفاق والغي والضلال. فاسألوا الله به وتوجهوا إليه بحبه، ولا تسألوا به خلقه، إنه ما توجه العباد إلى الله تعالى بمثل القرآن. واعلموا أنه شافع مشفع، أو مشفع بالأحرى هي مشفع، وقائل مصدق، وأنه من شفع له القرآن يوم القيامة شفع له، يعني القرآن هو الشفيع. طبعا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم هو الشفيع الأول، ولكن رسول الله يحبنا أن نستشفع بالقرآن الكريم أيضا، فحبيب قلبه القرآن الكريم. فأيها الإخوة، أيها الأحبة، ربما أطلت قليلا، ولكن كان هناك أمور شاهدتمني أحمل بعض الورقات، ولكن لا مجال لقراءتها، لأن هناك كثير من وصايا الإمام عليه السلام إن شاء الله في مناسبات لاحقة نذكرها ونعيش وإياها. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
Jazakumullah khair al-jaza. Now I call on Dr. Munsif Bimani to come up and give his lecture for tonight. We welcome him with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. My dear brothers, sisters, elders, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is a pleasure to be here again. I hope everybody's fasting is going well. I know for me it's sometimes hard. I spent a lot of time asleep today because I passed out. I was very, very tired today, and I'm sure many of you are feeling the same way, so I'll try to be very quick, but I was invited to speak in English tonight, a few words, and I thought that because we are entering the days when we will be talking about Imam Ali alayhi salatu wassalam, that we spend some time reflecting on the munajat of Imam Ali alayhi salam, because we will be reciting this munajat together, inshallah, and Sayyid Ruda, we all look forward to Sayyid Ruda's voice when we think of the munajat of Imam Ali alayhi salam. So I hope Sayyid Ruda will recite for us, inshallah, this year again. We all look forward to listening to you when you recite. But when it comes to the munajat, and the munajat of Imam Ali alayhi salam, which we will be reciting, it's not the only munajat that we have in our literature. We have several munajat. Many of you will have recited in the month of Sha'ban, the munajat of Sha'baniya. We also have munajat of the fourth Imam in Sahifatul Kamila, in Sahifatul Sajjadiyya, and these supplications are known as munajat Khamsa Ashar, the 15 munajat of Imam al-Sajjad. What are the munajat? So the munajat are different from dua. The munajat are what we call whispered prayers. So ideally, these prayers, these du'as are to be recited in silence and are to be whispered, because If you look at the content of the munajat, these are conversations that an individual has directly with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with very deep and very personal spiritual messages. So the one thing we have to remember is that although we recite these together, because we like to recite it together and hear the deeper spiritual voices that we recite them with together, then when we go home, these munajat are also munajat that we should be reciting as individuals when we are alone. And if we cannot recite it, we can always make a recording, or we can always find it on YouTube and recite it on our own silently, because these are whispered prayers. Munajat are silent prayers which we should be reciting. We should be reciting together, and then we should also be reciting them alone. When it comes to the munajat of Imam Ali alayhi salam, we find that this munajat, it is reported, was recited by Imam Ali alayhi salam himself in the mosque of Kufa. So for those of us who go to ziyarah, and inshallah everybody has an opportunity to go, when you go to the mosque of Kufa, you have these special reciters that come and they memorize this munajat and they recite it for you. And people have reported, and even I have experienced, that when you recite this munajat in the mosque of Kufa, sometimes you even feel the presence of Imam Ali alayhi salam with you there reciting this munajat. So it is attributed directly to Imam Ali alayhi salam. The munajat itself has 2 parts, and some people say 3 parts. So the first part is where Imam Ali alayhi salam sets the stage for the heart of the dua, or the heart of the munajat. And the heart of the munajat is a series of sentences where we say, Mawlaya ya Mawla, and we talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we express how small we are, how minute we are, how little we are compared to the greatness, compared to the superiority of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the heart of the dua. And that is not what I'm talking about today. That is for another time, because that is a much deeper discussion. But what we will focus in for a few minutes today is the beginning of the munajat, and how Imam Ali alayhi salatu wassalam sets the stage for the heart of the dua. And that is the first part of the munajat. And what is this first part about? So the first part of the munajat, Imam Ali is saying that we are asking for the protection of Allah from several things. And the word that he uses is what? Aman. Allahumma inni as'aluka al-aman. He's asking for the protection of Allah, in the sense of amana, that deep protection, that possessive protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The meaning of the word is very deep itself. And they say that even the first sentence of the munajat of Imam Ali alayhi salam is 10 lectures itself. Because when you go deeper into the discussion of what is this amana and what is this protection that we are asking for, Allahumma inni as'aluka al-amana yawma la yanfa'u malun wa la banun illa man atallahu biqalbin salim. Deep words, deep words. Each word in this introduction to the munajat is a discussion on its own. But in brief, because of time. O Allah, Imam Ali alayhi salam says, I ask you for protection on the day when property will not avail, nor sons. So malun wala banun. Why? Why is it mentioned specifically? There are so many things in the world. There are so many things in the world that we have attachment to. But Imam Ali alayhi salam has chosen 2 things to mention. And the other point I want to make is that in this munajat, if you analyze this munajat, between the words of Imam Ali alayhi salam are verses of the Holy Quran. And Imam Ali alayhi salam mixes his own words with verses of the Holy Quran back and forth. You can tell that whoever is reciting this is not only a poet of his own right, but is also a master of the knowledge of Quran. Because Imam Ali alayhi salam puts verses of the Quran, and when I was reading the resource that I was using, they mentioned the verses of the Quran. You go back and you see that Imam Ali, between his own words, is switching between his words and the verses of the Quran. And this is taken from Quran. And the next part is also from Quran. Illa man atallahu biqalbin salim. What is qalbin salim? I asked my Imam, what do you mean by qalbin salim? You know, we try to translate in English. And there are so many meanings to this sentence that it is only this particular quality in a human that will help him on that day. Which day? I'm going to talk about that. Because when we talk about these first few lines of the munajat, we assume that we are talking about the day of Qiyamah. Sahih? We're talking about the day of Qiyamah. This is the first thing that comes to mind. Mufassirin say, hold on. Yes, the overarching message is that this is the day of Qiyamah, but there are many days of disparity where these things become apparent to us. It doesn't have to be the day of Qiyamah. These things that we're going to talk about in the first half of the dua become apparent even in our lifetime when these things happen. And we are reminded of the human being and the human being's attachments to these things that we are going to talk about. So the first sentence, O Allah, I ask you for protection on the day when neither property will help you, nor your children. Malun wala banun. These are the biggest attachments we have in life, right? Our property and our children. And we think about these things as the center of our existence. We do everything to protect our property. In another part of Nahjul Balagha, Imam Ali alayhi salam has a brilliant sermon where he compares between knowledge and property. So many differences. I'm sure you know which sermon I'm talking about, but that's a discussion for another day. The center of our life is malun wala banun. Our property, we guard it. We protect it. We have alarm. We have nest. We have camera protecting our property. And the other thing, our children. We do everything for our children. We give them the best food. We give them the best schools. We give them the best education. But these days that we are talking about, the day of Qiyamah, but also other days in life, when none of this comes in handy. We ask Allah for protection from those days when none of this will come in handy except qalbin salim, a heart. So salim, qalb means heart. Salim means what? Salim means peaceful, means safe, means secure, free from evil. What is this qalbin salim? And that's probably one of the reasons why we recite this munajat in the month of Ramadan. Because in the month of Ramadan, these are themes that come up. We fast because we don't want to be so tied into our attachments. We want to detach from things. We want to be spiritually aware. We want to nurture the qalbin salim. We want to nurture that peaceful heart. The heart that is safe, the heart that is secure, the heart that is full of peace. So there's a deep meaning there. And furthermore, this deeper meaning is very relevant. Thank you, brother. It's very relevant in the month of Ramadan. So this is the first line, and that's very briefly what we are saying, is that we ask for protection from those days, the day of judgment being the primary one, but also other days when none of these things that we are attached to will come in handy for us. And the only thing that will help us is qalbun salim. And what is this qalbun salim? That is something we have to reflect on. How do you make your heart peaceful? How do you make your heart free? How do you make your heart safe? And these are very deep spiritual discussions. In the interest of time, we move on. Then we come to the next verse, or the next line. وَأَسْأَلُكَ الْأَمَانَ يَوْمَ يَعَظُ الظَّالِمُونَ عَلَى يَدَيْهِ يَقُولُ يَا لَيْتَنِي اتَّخَذْتُ مَعَ الرَّسُولِ سَبِيلًا. And I ask you for protection on the day when the unjust one, now we are coming to the unjust one. What is this? What is the word that's used? Zalimun, right? We are talking about those people who are unjust. Now, who are these people? And what do? They will bite their hands. They will bite their own hands, saying, I wish I had listened to the messenger. Ya laytani ittakhadhtu ma'a rasulin sabila. I wish I had taken the way of the messenger. I wish I had listened to the messenger. So we are talking about that day when these people, who are these people? Yawma ya'udhu dhalimun. Who are the dhalim? What does it mean, dhalim? Those who are oppressors, those who are unjust, those who do what? Dhulm. Dhalimun comes from dhulm. Those who do injustice to others. Now the first question, we think about those, we think about Hitler, we think about Saddam, we think about Gaddafi, we think about Mobutu, we think about all these dictators. These are the Zalimun. We think about Fir'aun. But we don't think about the fact that these qualities may even be amongst ourselves. And that is why we recite this munajat. Because I asked Imam Ali al-Islam, Imam Ali, you are on the right path. You are Imam. You are Ma'soom. Why are you reciting this munajat? And maybe one of the answers from Imam Ali alayhi salam is, we are reciting this to remind ourselves that these qualities that we are talking about are not only found in Hitler and Saddam and Gaddafi and all these people. These are qualities that sometimes seep into us also. And we remind ourselves that we don't want to have these kinds of qualities because we are asking for protection from the day when these people will be identified. And these people will say, I wish we had followed the messenger. They will be biting their own hands, saying that I wish we had followed the messenger. I wish we had listened to the messenger. This munajat is reminding us that, yes, those people are there. The Zalimun, they are there. But we don't want to be amongst those people. We want to be amongst those who are on the side of Imam Ali alayhi salam. These are people who are going to regret their actions. And those qualities that they have been nurturing, that have led them to become that way on those particular days, we certainly do not want to be amongst those people. And so we remind ourselves that these qualities of dhulm, of doing injustice to other people, because, we have this great oppressors and tyrants that did a lot of injustice, and that is injustice at a macro level, but at a micro level, there are a lot of injustices that happen. Some people are very mean. Some people are mean to the elders, right, in our communities. Some people are mean to their families. Some people are mean to their children. Some people are mean to their wives, right? And that's where these qualities come in, the qualities of zalim, of dhulm, reminding ourselves we cannot do dhulm to anyone. We cannot be unjust to anyone. The next line. وَأَسْأَلُكَ الْأَمَانَ يَوْمَ يُعْرِفُ الْمُجْرِمُونَ بِسِيمَاهُمْ فَيُؤْخَذُوا بِالنَّوَاسِي وَالْأَقْدَامِ. And I ask you for protection on the day when the guilty shall be recognized by their marks, so that they shall be seized by the forelocks and the feet. So we remind ourselves again, we talked about Zalimun, now we're talking about the Mujrimun. We're talking about those who are guilty. Those who are guilty of what? Those who are guilty of fitna. Those who are guilty of sin. Those who are guilty of crime. Those who are guilty of corruption. You can talk a lot about Mujrimun. Imam Ali alayhi salam is saying we want to be protected from the day when these people will be identified. Those who are guilty of all kinds of crimes. And again, like we said, this is not only about those people who have committed egregious crimes. This is also about us. This is also about reminding ourselves that we do not want to be among those who would be considered Zalimun, who would be considered Mujrimun. We want to be amongst those who are not identified, because what happens to those who are identified? They shall be seized by their forelocks and their feet. And again, primarily, this will happen on the day of Qiyamah, but sometimes people find justice even before that. Their Qiyamah comes early, and on those days they are identified and their sins are identified. Please recite the salawat. وأسألك الأمانة يوم لا يجزي والد وولدي ولا مولود هو جاز عن والده شيئا إن وعد الله الحق. And I ask you for protection on the day when a father shall not give any satisfaction for his son or child, nor shall the child give any satisfaction for the father. You know how we said, Malun wala banun? We are so attached to our children. We do so much for our kids. We do everything. We even give our life for our kids. But Imam says, the day will come when neither the child will get satisfaction from their parents, and neither the parents will get satisfaction from their child. And he says, verily, this is the truth. And again, Imam Ali switches. He switches from his own speech. Now he comes back to Quran. What does he say? Inna wa'adallahu al-haq. Brilliant. Can we give a speech like that? If I ask anybody here, give a speech and put in your own material, your own content, but go back and forth. This verse of the Quran, that verse of the Quran. I don't think anyone can do it. Only Imam Ali alayhi salam is capable of deriving this type of material. So this is the second time in the munajat, and even later on, when we come to another part of the munajat, that we talk about the children. We talk about our kids. We talk about our progeny. And it's reminding us that, yes, we are attached to these aspects of our life, our kids, our progeny, our children. But remember that these are fleeting things as well. Your mal, your banoon, these are not going to be with you forever. These things are going to pass. These things are going to move on, to the point where Imam Ali says that neither the father will have satisfaction from their children, nor the children will have satisfaction from their parents, reminding us that ultimately we are all responsible for our own individual actions, and that we will all be on our own when these days come. Even the children will leave their parents, even the parents will leave their children. And that's also mentioned in a subsequent verse. Attachment to children is a big part of life today. But in this month of Ramadan, we have to detach. We have to remind ourselves that we are not attached to anything except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we are not attached to anything except the act of creating qalbun salim, which is the first line of the munajat. The next part, وَأَسْأَلُكَ الْأَمَانَ يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ الظَّالِمِينَ مَعَذِرَتَهُمْ وَلَهُمْ لَعْنَهُ وَلَهُمْ سُوءُ الدَّارِ. And I ask you for protection on the day when the unjust shall not benefit from their excuses. And for them is the curse, and for them is the evil abode. We talk about ma'aziratahum and the zalimun again. And what do we talk about them in the context? We ask for protection from the day when those unjust people will not be able to make excuses. You know how good we are at making excuses for anything? When you want to do something good, when you want to do something productive, when you want to do something creative, when you want to do something positive, there are always excuses that come up. Oh, I'm too busy. Oh, I'm too tired. And in the context of the zalimun, they always have excuses. Why are you doing dhulm? Why are you oppressing people? Why are you hurting people? Why are you committing injustices? The excuses come. Oh, this is all political. This is all politics. This is how we keep control. This is how we control the people. No, this is dhulm. There are no excuses when it comes to dhulm. And if you analyze what Imam Ali is saying here, is that the day will come when those excuses will not work anymore for the zalimun. Whether it's zalimun at the macro level, the tyrants, the dictators, or whether it's those microaggressions, whether it's zulm at the level of you and I, at the level of the common people. For all of us who have committed zulm, the day of reckoning shall come, and those excuses will not work anymore. And it's also a reminder to us that the habit of making excuses whenever something good comes in our minds, those things are not part of the purified soul of Qalbun Salim. وَأَسْأَلُكَ الْأَمَانَ يَوْمَ لَا تَمْلِكُ نَفْسٍ لِنَفْسٍ شَيْئًا وَالْأَمْرُ يَوْمَئِذٍ لِلَّهِ. And I ask you for protection on the day when no soul shall control anything for another soul, and the command on that day shall be entirely Allah's. We are asking for protection on the day when one person cannot control another. Because when we live in this life, we are always interacting with people that maybe we are trying to control, whether it's our kids, whether it's our workers, whether it's our younger brothers or sisters, whether it's our servants. We try to control people. And again, Imam Ali is saying that on that day, we will not be able to do that. Every soul will be given their own power. Those who are weak will have the power for themselves. And those who are strong will also have their own power and will not be able to control other people. And it is interesting how it is mentioned as control of the soul, because controlling somebody's mind is way worse than controlling their body. Because if you think about slavery, we think about the slave trade, and when people had slaves, they used to control the bodies of other people, but they could not control their minds, right? What is now a reality in our lives with social media and with influencers and with Instagram is how this whole technology is trying to control the minds of people, not their bodies, right? All these technologies are starting to influence our minds and exert control over our souls. And Imam Ali is reminding us that the day will come when these things will no longer work, when these things will pass. And that is a reminder that these are all fleeting things that no longer will work when we come to those days. The day will come when there will be no control of one individual over another. وَأَسْأَلُكَ الْأَمَانَ يَوْمَ يَفِرُّ الْمَرْءُ مِنْ أَخِيهِ وَأُمِّهِ وَأَبِيهِ وَصَاحِبَتِهِ وَبَنِيهِ لِكُلِّ أَمْرٍ مِّنْهُمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ شَأْنُ يُغْنِي. And I ask you for protection on the day when a man shall run from his brother and his mother, his father, his spouse, and his children. Each one of them on that day will have their own worries, their own concerns, their own problems. Again, we talked about Malun wala Banun before, and we come back to this topic in this munajat. That this is the day will come when we will run away from each other. You know how we are so close to each other today? The day will come when we will all run away from each other. We will not want to be next to anyone. Why? Because on that day we will each have our own concerns that will occupy us. The day of Qiyamah comes around and we will all start freaking out about our actions, about what our judgment will be, about what things people will find out about us, about what sins we have to account for, about what secrets we have hidden. Everything will be out in the open. And because of that, we will be so ashamed of ourselves that we will not want to be with anyone else. Now, remember what we said earlier? Yes, the overarching theme is that this is applied to the day of Qiyamah, but Mufassirin say that we have to think about this not only in the context of Qiyamah, but also in the context of the fact that these days may come around in our own lifetime, when people will get exposed, when people will get shamed for sins or crimes or misdemeanors that they have carried out in their life. And on that day, everybody will be alone. And some people will get their reckoning and will get their accountability even before the day of Qiyamah. These are known as mini Qiyamah. The next verse, Imam Ali says, and I ask you for protection on the day when the guilty will wish to redeem themselves by sacrificing their children. So now we have gone from the point of being committed to our mal and banoon. Now we are saying that, oh, no, take my children. Just save me. Take my children. So see how Imam Ali is talking about the human psychology, right? We started from a point where we were saying that we're so attached to these things. Now we're coming to the point where we're getting to the end of the first part of the munajat. And Imam Ali alayhi salam is now saying that people will do the full cycle of going from being attached to the children to now saying that we wish to redeem ourselves. We will sacrifice our children and our kin who gave us shelter and all those that are in the earth to be delivered. And Imam Ali brings the verse of the Quran saying, by no means, surely it is a flaming fire and they will be dragged by their heads. We are reminded how fickle are our possessions and our children and the relatives. All these attachments are so transient. When these types of days will come, we will be so eager to sever our ties with all our attachments and to sacrifice all these attachments to redeem ourselves, except it won't happen because we will be dragged into the fire for all the crimes we have committed, especially those who have done those things, who have been dhalimun, who have been mujrimun, who have done dhulm, who have been guilty of various bad things. All those people, they won't be able to redeem themselves when these days will come in their lives, and they will be taken for accounting into the fire of hell. This is the first part of the munajat. And Imam Ali is setting the stage for the second part, where we start saying, Mawla ya Mawla. And we go through all those things where we say, who are we and who is Allah? But Imam Ali alayhi salam has set the stage for that part by describing what it is that it's going to be our accounting. What is it that we want to be protected from? And what is it that we don't want to have in our lives? What qualities do we want to stay away from? And what qualities do we want to build up? So to recap, we covered today what is a munajat and how it should be recited. We covered the connection of munajat of Imam Ali to the month of Ramadan, reminding us of our closeness to Allah and the things that we should detach from and try to remember that as much as we value our mal and banoon, the goal is to be as detached from these things as possible and to have as few attachments in the dunya. What are the first few lines of the munajat? We covered that. Why are we asking Allah for protection on these days when we are followers of Imam Ali alayhi salam and on the right path? We say that Imam Ali is reciting this munajat, even though he is Imam, he is still wanting protection because these qualities are only not found in the dictators and tyrants of the world, but they also seep into each and every one of us. And we have to remember when we recite this munajat that we are also prone to getting some of these types of qualities in our own lives. The things we ask for protection from are the qualities not only in the enemies of Islam, but also in ourselves. It will become apparent on those days of reckoning that all these qualities in human nature need work to be eliminated at many levels, at both the individual and societal level. The same things we are attached to, we are so willing to give up when it comes to the reckoning. We talked about dhalimun, mujrimun, our attachments to children and property. We talked about qalbul salim, that peaceful heart, that safe heart, that sage heart, which is not attached to anything. And Imam says in the first line that the only way to achieve redemption is to nurture that type of a heart. We talked about wa'adallahu bil haqq, that everything Allah has said is truth, and Imam Ali ties this into his own material, his own content of the munajat. He ties it into verses of the Quran, and then that is how Imam Ali alayhi salam sets the stage for the second part of the munajat. Inshallah, we will talk about it next time. My dear brothers and sisters, thank you for coming out and listening to a few words of English. Inshallah, we shall recite this munajat starting on the Amal nights. And I ask you all to keep me in mind and in your prayers when you recite and when you do your Amal. Having said that, I thank you for inviting me, Sayyid Ruda, and the committee. And I would like to end with a loud salawat, followed by Suratul Fatiha.
أحسنت دكتور منصف، جزاكم الله خير الجزاء. توجهوا للزيارة بارك الله فيكم لتعجيل فرج مولانا ولشفاء المرضى، لا سيما المنظورين. سماحة الشيخ أبو ثريا العلوية أم زينب الهاشمي شقيق الأخ علي عز الدين وجميع المرضى، نقرأ الآية المباركة سويا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. اللهم شافي جميع المرضى يا الله بحرمة هذه الليالي المباركة. السلام عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، وعلى الأرواح التي حليت بفنائك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين، السلام على الحسين، السلام على وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، وعلى أخيك وحامل لوائك أبي الفضل العباس، وعلى أختك الحوراء أم المصائب زينب، لتعجيل فرج مولانا صاحب العصر والزمان. نقرأ سويا. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات لا سيما من قضى من أهل هذا الجمع نهدي ثواب سورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلوات.